We're very pleased to have Dr. Richard Hope, a member of the class of 1961, who has graciously agreed to give us an interview in connection with the 150th Morehouse Anniversary History Project. As you know, Dr. Hope, we are doing an oral history project as part of that larger enterprise. And so you are one of the prominent alums of the college that we are videotaping, as well as talking to you about your years at Morehouse, and of course about your grandfather, President John Hope. Our first question is, what is your full name, and when and where you were born, and of course how you decided to come to Morehouse. Of course, I think we kind of understand that Morehouse connection with your grandfather being the president of Morehouse, so we kind of understand that, but that is our first question.
Well, I'm Richard Oliver Hope, and I was born on right around here on Lee Street, and in a house I'm very proud of that Clark tore down so it could put its science building there, right on
Yeah, I think that house was there when I came.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I think E.B. Williams was next door, and so anyway. That was a auspicious beginning, and we went to Oglethorpe School in kindergarten. Lived on Beckwith Street. That is my family. John Hope third, John Hope second, and my brother and sister, John Hope third, and Linda. And we lived there for about 2 or 3 years, and then my father got the call to go to Fisk University. He was an economist, as you know, and so we went to Nashville, where really I had my formative years in elementary, junior high, high school, and all public school. Very proud of that, and my elementary school was in the projects in Nashville, and to this day, you'd be interested. In fact, I'm meeting with one of my buddies who is now retired here in Atlanta, who grew up right in this area, and we had a bunch of little raggedy guys who used to get, and we still get together annually in somebody's house somewhere. And so anyway, that was my form.
What was his name?
Yeah, David Patton.
David Patton. And the names of the schools in Nashville?
Well, it was Pearl Elementary, which was in the projects there, as we called it, and Washington Junior High School, and then Pearl High School, the famous hoodlum school of Nashville, of which we were very proud. And I played a little football, and then I realized that the girls didn't enjoy. They wanted to see the guys that made the touchdowns, and since I was a guard, I looked up and I said, they're not cheering for me. So I went in the band where I got a little more recognition, and then from there, as you say, I came to Morehouse, and I had scholarships, to be frank, at several schools. And my father says, son, you're going to Morehouse. Actually, I sort of saw myself as a jazz musician. I was interested in jazz.
What
and trombone.
Oh, okay.
And you might know Wayman Reed. I don't know. He was the solo trumpet for Basie. He was in a group, and there were several others and we were pretty good. So we thought that.
Now this was here in Nashville.
This was in Nashville, and
So you were quite young at that time.
oh yeah. Played in New York actually a little bit, much to my mother's worry. And so, but anyway, long story short, came to Morehouse in '57 on that fateful day, and I still remember the rain and the red clay coming down the hill, and I said, "Is this where I'm going?" You know.
Believe it or not, that's the next question.
Yeah, what-
What's the first impression
Oh,
of Morehouse? We all have the
oh,
first day we
absolutely.
arrive. Tell yours.
All right. Oh, well, it, as I say, it was raining like crazy, and the first interesting day, you'd appreciate this. Here I am, white-looking Hope, who happens to be black, and I know where. You know, I grew up. I know where they used to call them the colored taxis. So I knew my place, you know. So I went over to the colored taxi, you know, and I said Morehouse, and he looked at me, "Sir, we can't take you there." And I said, "What do you mean you can't take me there?" He said, "You know, I'd lose my license if I take a white boy over to Morehouse." And then I gave him a few choice words, and then he realized, well, I guess you must be.
Wow, that's a wonderful
and
story.
then he
Revealing.
proceeded to take me there.
Yeah, wow.
So, and then
and you arrived on Fair Street?
we
where?
came, well, to Graves Hall. So in those days, you could come around, you know, where they've cut off the little road that goes down to Graves Hall there.
But you could come to the gate, the big
Yeah.
gate, and
No, well, the gate next to Graves Hall.
Okay,
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, and there I went in and met Miss Archer. She was the secretary at that time. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And as you know, she ruled the roost.
Oh, she did.
And she knew exactly who I was. She came in there and she says, "Yes, young man." And I said, "Well, I came to find a dormitory room." And she said, "Now, what's your name?" And I gave her my name. And she said, "Now, where are you from?" She knew all this, of course. "Where are you from?" You know, she took it down and all this. And she assigned me to the area of Graves Hall, which we used to call Beaver Slide.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember? This is on the third floor for you young fellas.
I was on the forefront.
That's right.
Confrontations with the guys on the
Oh, and then we became hoodlums, you see. You know. And because Beaver Slides, you know, had a reputation to uphold. And I think she intentionally put me in there. So I went there with the two other guys. We had a room maybe about a quarter the size of this area here. We had bunk beds and the window that actually pulled in and out. It had no tracking on it, so when the wind blew, the window would just blow out. And so we became, it's amazing, fast friends. And Charles Edward Smith was one of the guys, and we roomed together for 4 years. And we, to this day, the same kind of bond. You know, I talked to him, 2 days ago. And he's an interesting guy you might want to talk to. He retired as senior vice president for Nabisco. And I knew him when he was just buying tires and things like that. But when he retired, he was buying cities and, you know, for factories and all of that. And now he's playing out his dream. He has a house on the golf course. He's got a ton of money. Tell him I said that. He has a lot of money. In South Carolina, I think. But he's listed.
Okay, very good.
Charles E. Smith.
Charles E. Smith.
And
He didn't make it back for the reunion.
no, well, I don't know how much of this. How much time do we have here?
Well,
anyway, well, the long and the short of it is he has a golf tournament that he sponsors every year, and pays for, he looked on the schedule for the graduation. He knew that it was our year, and it wasn't up on the internet at the time, and so he chose to avoid the date that it normally is, and apparently it was at a different date this time around. And so I called him about this, and he gave a few kind words over the phone that I can't repeat, and saying that I have this tournament, you know, and he couldn't even break loose since he was a sponsor, you know. So, but we had a great turnout of
Yeah. I
30,
remember that,
33 guys returning and raising $179,000. That was pretty, for a little group like that, that's not
Yeah.
bad.
That is, that's wonderful. Now, did you say you had another roommate? Were there 3 of you in the room?
Right, Roderick Jackson.
Right.
And Roderick is in Durham, I think. He is has a PhD. He'd be another interesting guy.
Mhm.
Both of them came, by the way, from Danville, Virginia,
Mhm.
and it was interesting, sort of chronology, because I used to spend some summers in Danville working on a farm with my uncles. And doing, I had a mule assigned to me, Sugar Bottom, at the age of I think it was around 8 or 9, something like that. And my initial job, and you bond. I don't know how much you know about mules. You got,
Well, I've
but
seen
anyway,
them, and I think
but
I've touched one.
I will.
That's what this-
But anyway, mules are sort of like these the animals that will bond with one person,
Yeah,
like
okay.
that. And you hear mules being stubborn,
Yeah.
and well, they're not stubborn; they're just selective,
Yeah.
And so
Like cats.
yeah, exactly. And so anyway, long story short, we bonded, and my job was to hook the harness up. This is like the age of 8 now, and had these these big harnesses on them. Do that, and in fact, I had sort of a stool that I would get on to do that, and then hook him up to this flatbed truck, and then go out to all the barns. My uncles there must have been, let's see, there were 4 uncles and 4 farms, so it was a pretty sizable place, and so I would go and clean out the barns, the poop, or we had other words, and put it on the flatbed truck, and then go out in the fields, and he would run just straight and true, down the furrows there, and so I could let the reins go, and I'd just take a pitchfork and shovel that was the original organic farming, See, now they're going back to that,
Yeah, I remember farms like we had a garden. before we
Yeah,
did that.
yeah. But it was great discipline for me, It was, and I regret that my children didn't have that opportunity. Yeah.
Now, the first night, you're in Graves Hall with Charles and Roderick,
Mhm.
and there are other members of the class of '61 who are arriving, and we get their rooms, and I know that process. What is it that you guys did that first night? Did you just stay in the room and put your stuff away and chat, or did you go to Yates and Milton?
I think the first night we commiserated because we didn't have any food. But of course, the dining hall,
Yeah, right.
and we said, "Uh-oh, is this gonna be the food?" and so we started trying to figure that out, and we met some guys from the city.
Who in the other?
At Morehouse, who lived in the city. Melvin Smith, Melvin Douglas Smith, who passed away, was he was a pediatric cardiological surgeon, if you can imagine, who performed operations intravenously, within the woman. And he studied under DeBakey in Texas, and became, in addition to being a millionaire, a multimillionaire, he was probably one of the best pediatric surgeons in the world. In fact, he was flown all over I know he went, he was flown to Shaw, and I think he had a grandbaby who had some problems, and so he was all over the world. But us poor little colored boys started right, and he lived just right down the street.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to go back in a minute to your knowledge of your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So, was there any hazing that night?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes.
Tell
We
us
had.
about that, then
We.
we'll go back to
We'll go back. Well,
Yeah.
first you had the Morehouse beanie.
Yeah,
You all know, you don't have the beanie
They
now.
don't, we don't have it
The-
in
you don't.
yeah.
Oh yes.
But I get
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And we were crabs.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's interesting. I came much later to lecture at the Air Force Academy and at West Point and different places, you know, where they are very clear about the hazing process as a useful process in terms of establishing hierarchy, a structure, and respect system. And so when they were talking to me, they said, "Well, sir," this is just before I spoke. They said, "Well, sir, you know we have a different system. We have the freshmen over here." And I said, "I understand that. I went to Morehouse." And we went to we sat up in the graves in the chapel in the top there, right?
In Graves Hall.
No,
In
with
Sale
Sale Hall.
Okay, all right.
In Sale Hall. Remember did you do that? You're younger man than that.
Well, that's where we met too, because that was
Okay,
the other chapel
okay,
there. Now we
okay.
do, King
That's right.
Chapel.
That's right. Yeah. Much easier.
Absolutely.
I spoke at the chapel a couple of times, and the process is a little different now. You can hide a little bit better, I think.
Now, right.
But Pop Dansby would look down, and he knew exactly who was and was not there. So, yeah.
Now, of course, you were familiar with Morehouse because of your Morehouse connections. We all know that President John Hope came in 1906, I believe, and served for quite a number of years. What is the oral history story in your family about your grandfather? Now, it's my understanding that he died before you were born. Am I correct?
Correct. Right.
But
In
what
36.
are the stories? What are the remembrances that you know that have been passed on to the family about your grandfather's very prominent, important career, not only to Morehouse but internationally? So if you just take some time to tell us something about your grandfather.
Well, many stories. I don't know how much time you want to take on that. All.
And then return to your story.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah.
Both stories
Well,
are
mine is humble compared to his. But first, a kind of sense of who he was. He was a person who was a classicist. He taught Greek and spoke Latin. How many black folks do you know speaking Latin? And always had a sense of respect for people. I was curious as to how all of that sort of started, because he, as you know, grew up with a father who was white and a mother who was black. In fact, her mother was a slave, and so you're not talking far from slavery to John Hope's existence, the mother. And I always thought, and by the way, just parenthetically, I hope you're interviewing Leroy Davis. Yes, who wrote, yeah, he did an amazing job with that. In fact, John Hope Franklin, who introduces that book, this is years ago when I had him up to speak at Princeton. John Hope was wrote the preface and told the publisher, "Don't edit a word out of this book." And they did not. And now it's a very thick book, but so well done and well written, et cetera.
It was a labor of love. It took him years to do that. But,
absolutely.
Leroy was at one time on the faculty here.
I thought I heard that. Yes, yeah. In fact, I met Leroy in the Princeton Library where I was teaching. And I had heard, I'd been looking for years where Ridgely Torrance, who wrote the first book on John Hope, had his notes, because I had heard all kinds of things from my relatives who said that the only way Torrance, who was white, by the way, white liberal to radical liberal, only way he could interview some of the relatives of John Hope was to agree to, after they did the interview, to burn his notes. And I thought about this, and I said, you know, no historian worth his salt would you burn your notes? You know, and that's right. I mean, and so I always thought that somewhere, wherever the repository is of his notes, it would be just a gold mine, because in my family, at least of his siblings, of which there were 9, at least 3, if not 5, went white, passed, as they say. And, you know, I was very interested in those days. I was a little more militant. Well, you need to know, I was in the first sit-in in Atlanta with Julian Bond and Marion Wright Edelman, and I helped form SNCC as a result of, I went overseas, studied over there, Crossroads, Africa. I was the first student to go to Crossroads. In fact, Julius was one of the ones that I encouraged to do that, and Julius Coles. And as a result of that, you can see he went into international affairs and all of that. So, but anyway, when I came back, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but when I came back, I went to Julian one day and I said, Julian, why do we sit in the back of the bus? Now, Julian looked at me and he said, you know, blankety blank, well, why we sit there? And I said, no, I did, you know, of course I did. But when the juxtaposition of West Africa, of Senegal, which is where I was, and Atlanta, they had just become independent. And I said, you know, they own their own buses. They run the show. Why aren't we running the show? We are in the majority in this city, you know. Anyway, that began a discussion which was validated actually by the first sit-in in Greensboro. And so I think we then were probably the second or the third to do that.
Atlanta were almost around the same time.
That's right. That's right, and so we got very involved with that whole process. But anyway, going back to John Hope, I'm just thinking of his manner now. If you read, his best friend was W.B. Du Bois. I mean, they were like brothers.
Recent letters between.
Is that right? Is that right? Well, I mean, it's absolutely. I mean, he was this guy who was he wasn't even radical. He was beyond radical. And here is this other person who is, if you see him, in addition to looking white, he is this sort of very staid, gentlemanly, articulate, and you would think conservative.
Benjamin Brawley, in the first history of Morehouse, described your grandfather very much like you just described him.
Absolutely.
Very elegant,
Absolutely.
asked for white.
Yep. Yep. And he totally agreed with Du Bois, and against the Washington, and there's a lot there if you want to go into it. But so you had this, in terms of his persona, though, always respect. The one thing that I think, one of the indelible things that happened at Morehouse is that he refused to allow anybody to call a Morehouse man a boy. They are all Morehouse men. And if you go back and look at that literature, the whole concept that we are men of Morehouse, and he started that, and would absolutely go berserk if anybody called one of his students a boy. And so you had, but in persona, he had this appearance. And I think to a large extent, in fact, it's interesting, I found in some of my own work, that people in many ways, go by what they see rather than what they hear. And so you can make some fundamental changes by just appearing one way and talking another.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I started the first Race Relations Institute for the Department of Defense, which is still going to this day. It's called DOMI, Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, and it's the only institution in this country that deals directly with the issue of race for an established institution, such as the Department of Defense. And it happened because of what they thought they saw, and what they heard. They said, "Oh, he could mean that." But anyway, I got base commanders fired. I was involved in the evaluations of riots in the military. Remember that whole period right after Vietnam, and the Kitty Hawk. So I did a lot of those investigations, and so that is until they realized that I was the guy that was, in a sense, providing DOD with this information, and then I had a target on my back. So I walked.
In terms of
They wanted to kill me. No, people wanted to kill me because I'm having white base commanders fired, and so I had to walk around with a pistol, and I had security. But anyway, that program is still going on, and it's an amazing program. You might want to look at it.
Yeah,
It's called DOMI, Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, and that was started in about around 70, 71, something like that. But you can Google that, and you'll see that.
It's good because some of the anecdotal stories like this one
Mm-hmm.
are important, and many others.
Mm-hmm.
that you've
Mm-hmm.
told. So we're not only going to preserve these in our archives,
Mhm.
but we're going to use some of this information
Mhm.
to tell the story
Mm-hmm.
of Morehouse. And of course, we will make the interviewees more alumni privy to what we're going to say,
Mhm.
so they can say,
Mhm.
well, but this is one of those great stories that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
In this vein, do you think your activism is a kind of continuation of your grandfather's? Because he was with Du Bois at Niagara, the Niagara,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
the only black college president who dared go.
Mhm.
So do you think there was something?
Oh,
that was
I'm
there?
sure. No, well, when my father went to Nashville, the Charles Johnson, the sociologist, was president of Fisk, and they had a program. It was a private, small program. It's called the Race Relations Institute. I don't know that you knew about that. And that Thurgood Marshall, and there were many of the folks that were trying to organize the civil rights movement in the 40s and 50s. Came right out of that program. And I grew up in that. I mean, and so I didn't, by the way, I was not a military person. I was civilian and did not want to go in the military. It was, I was opposed to Vietnam, and I'd been out speaking against Vietnam, the whole thing. And the person by the name of L. Howard Bennett, who was on the board of Fisk at the time, who went to Fisk along with John Hope Franklin, knew the Race Relations Institute. I mean, he'd participated. And so when Hubert Humphrey appointed him as the first black Assistant Secretary of Defense, it was his job to solve the problem of racism in the military. And he concluded, and I think accurately so, that the problem can be solved, at least in part, by education. And at the time, I guess I was the only surviving person that knew about the Race Relations Institute. And so he said, go out and find Richard Hope. And when the military decides that, remember that, guys. I was teaching at Brooklyn College. I was assistant professor at Brooklyn College, and guy calls me up and says, Dr. Hope, your country needs you. And I said, okay, I will hang this guy up. And he mentioned L. Howard Bennett's name. and I knew that name. And so anyway, it was out of that that he encouraged me to develop the curriculum, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar operation. You know, when the military does. So it's a huge. Yeah. In fact, it's having its 40th reunion this year. So it's and Colin Powell and others will tell you that it made all the difference in the world. He would never have been head of Joint Chiefs without that. Absolutely.
Now, your grandmother, Mrs. Eugenia Burns, Dr. Jacqueline Rouse has written the book of your grandmother.
Mm.
Forgive me, but I can't remember when she passed. Was she still alive when you were born?
Yes.
Did you know?
Yes.
Tell us a little
I
bit
did.
about her.
I
Because
did.
we do want to infuse
Did
the
know.
first ladies in the book in a larger way than
Yeah.
has been done before.
Yeah. Well, it would be a huge mistake if you didn't consider the importance of Eugenia, as he called it, it was his Jeannie. Jeannie, called her Jeannie, in all of his decisions in one way or another, even when they disagreed. Now she was, but he could always count on her to give a well thought out advice. But she'd tell it like it is. I mean, she was a kind of a street organizer in Chicago, you know, and she started organizations in Chicago and down here, you know, they started the neighborhood unions and ultimately the Urban League came out of that, and School of Social Work came out of that. So she was a force in her own right, and so she was very helpful in his decisions. There's no question about that, and helping him to think through. There were not a lot of people, as you can imagine, that he could sort of rely on to think about these pretty tough decisions he had to make, and she was definitely one of them. But I mean, to us, very loving, you know, grandmother, and you know, would die for us, and so we, you know, were with her quite a bit, and yeah.
Now, I know this is a very sensitive subject, but her last rites. There's this myth about her last rites. Was she cremated? I don't
Yes.
know. And were her remains preserved, or what was that final ritual? We've heard.
I was there at the ceremony. She wanted her ashes sprinkled over Morehouse, and so I remember actually walking to Graves Hall, and they went up to that little tower up there, and they sprinkled her ashes there. It absolutely did. And aside, Wendell Whalum, who of course became important. I was in the Glee Club and in the quartet, as you know, at Morehouse, but I remember Wendell laughing much later. You know, we became good buddies. He said, "Yeah, we heard that," and he was, I think, a freshman or something in Graves, and he said, "We heard they were going to be pouring all this ashes down." We man, everybody say, "Close your windows." This dead lady's coming down.
That sounds like Wendell.
Yeah.
The final question on your grandfather, and then we'll go back to your illustrious career first. The next question about you will be how did you decide on what you majored in. But the last question about your grandfather and Mrs. Hope, would be when that transition took place, forming the Atlanta University, the graduate school, and Morehouse and Spelman is affiliated with that. There were some turbulent times. What is the story in your family about President Hope's dual role as President of Morehouse and of the graduate school?
Right.
Do you remember anything that your family talked about that he might have?
Oh yeah, this was probably one of the most traumatic times and I got this through my father, who was there, and from all that I can gather, frankly, he did not want to go to Atlanta University. He did not. He had not finished his work at Morehouse. He, in fact, he was doing a capital campaign at the time for Morehouse. Absolutely, and his life really was all about Morehouse. I mean, if you boil it down to sort of what motivated him, and what happened, and that's where Davis does a very good job of this conflict. And I was talking to Janetta Cole about this, and your President Franklin, same experiences, where the power of the moneyed, in those days, the philanthropists, would really rue the day. I mean, it was what I gather was that he got the word that all monies would cease at Morehouse from the I forget the board that if he stayed at Morehouse, and so he was one, trying to finish the capital campaign, which was and first he didn't believe him. And then the word was clear that basically everything would cease. As you know, they had just done now the Trevor Arnett Library, and contrary to popular belief, although he ideologically differed with Washington, the one thing that he always had going for him was his manner. If you talk to anybody who was his friend or any of the writings about him, was absolutely, I mean, and he's true, he would go through fire for his friends. And his friends, and they were, all over the place ideologically. So Washington respected him. Moton was like a buddy.
I read some of the letters.
In fact, we used to go up to Cappahossic, the summer place of Booker T. Washington, and so they would meet there. People didn't even know that all these guys would meet quietly, in this area where one, if they were caught, they probably would have been lynched. And this is an area that was so way off the beaten trail. I could tell you how to get there now, and you'd never find it. Yeah, but have you been to the Moton Center? You might want to.
Booker T. Washington's home in Tuskegee?
No, the Moton Center in Virginia. It's called Cappahossic, Virginia.
No, I have not been.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of these decisions and almost agreeing to sort of develop their plays, if you will, if you're a football. Okay, Washington, you say this, and Du Bois, you say this, and Hope will say this. And one of us will get money. And there was a lot of interaction between, people thought that they hated each other, and no, not at all. In fact, it was Washington who wrote to Carnegie requesting that Carnegie give them the money to fund the Atlanta University Library. How about that?
Yeah, isn't that something?
That was Booker T. Washington supporting his friend John Hope, who, and both of them publicly, battling back and forth. We're not interested in trades. We're interested in the intellectual of the mind. And
So are you saying that Du Bois was at Cappahossic?
Cappahossic. Capahoic, C-A-P-A-S-O-C-S-O-C-S-O-I-C.
So was Du Bois there too, with your grandfather and?
Yeah, oh yes,
Okay.
oh yeah, yeah. They
Yeah,
would all sort of gather
yeah.
there quietly, you know.
Yeah,
no
kinda knew that they were
newspapers.
not mortal enemies, but they just
Oh, yeah.
ideologically were
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
Just like King and Malcolm. They
Absolutely,
They liked each other. They
absolutely,
liked each other.
absolutely.
Very fascinating
Absolutely.
stuff. Let's now return to your life and your story. You're at Morehouse. We all have to decide on a major. How did you come to decide on your major at Morehouse? And then subsequent to that, your career path.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Like all the rest of my class, I was going to be a doctor. And you know that freshman week, and Dr. Mays would have us all at a dinner. And he said, well, I want you all to stand up, say who you are, where you're from, and what you're going to be. And so they did this all, and somehow I was in the end of that whole presentation, and everybody's saying I'm so and so, and I'm from so and so, and I'm going to be a doctor. And I got there, and I said, well, you know, I'm Richard Hope, and I'm going to be a doctor too. So, but always sort of the sieve in this process was one Mac Bay. And you take the course, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. That what he had this intro class, what was it, like 200 of something like that, and you wind up with like 25 in this. I'm sure it was just fate that I actually did make the second semester. So of course, if you make a second semester, then you walking around. In those days, you wear a slide rule on the side. You know, do you remember that? and you knew you were the baddest dude on campus. You know, so immediately walk over to Spelman to show off. You know that you're going to be a doctor. You know, and so. It's hard to keep this stuff down, I know. So I majored in biology and minored in chemistry, and Jim Burney, who was by the way, one of the best teachers I've ever met. I don't know whether you ever had a chance to take any of his courses. Jim Burney. Mm-hmm.
No, I remember him. I had Dr. Mapp since I was not a science major, but I did have to take biology.
Yeah, an amazing teacher. But anyway, and I'm talking about all the teachers I've ever had now. So I'm, blithely going through doing and taking Kim Huggins' class, and organic chemistry and the whole deal. And by then, I had gotten involved in the sit-in movement, and then SNCC and a lot of activities. And I remember looking out, in fact, in the chemistry lab in those days. I think it was on the second floor, and because organic chemistry is pretty funky anyway. It's organic.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm thinking now, what is the relationship between organic chemistry and the sit-ins? And I just couldn't make that intellectual leap. It didn't make sense to me. And I had the good fortune of meeting Pop Shivers, who was teaching sociology, as you know. Absolutely. And when did you graduate?
65.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we used to
Yeah.
came in 61
Right.
in the fall, you graduated.
Right. And Pop taught more sociology on the wall. Remember the wall at the unit? So we began just sort of talking. The kids would say rapping today, about what's going on now. And he'd been quite an activist himself, as it turned out. And then a fellow named Lionel Newsom came to, and he came to Morehouse sort of like a lot of the faculty. They were these radical guys that other schools couldn't handle. He was, if you can imagine, full professor of sociology at Southern.
Mhm.
And he was fired now because he was allowing the student senators to meet in his house, his personal house. But that's the way it was in those days.
State schools were
And
more
that's
under
right.
the gun than
Absolutely.
private schools were too, but not.
Yeah,
state
yeah.
schools.
But
State schools.
and you know, Morehouse, and you know, just like they brought Du Bois back when he was out of favor, and John Hope brought his buddy back, and you know, and so, but I still had this sort of elitism, science elitism, I would call it, that McBay espoused clearly, that you know, human behavior is not predictable. You can't do that, you know. And so I met Newsom, and Newsom, another great teacher, by the way. And I remember the first conversation I had with him. It just I said, well, you know, you can't predict what humans now. You put chemicals in a test tube, I can predict what's going to happen. You put the flame on, and it'll
Objective science.
absolutely. And he said, oh, is that right? And so that just gave the challenge. And he said, have you heard of probabilities and statistics? And I said, well, yeah, I heard that. You know, I know about that stuff. And he reached on his shelf and got a book and said, now, Mr. Hope, read this book. When you finish, come back and talk to me. And of course, this was all about human behavior and predictability and all that. And I just, you know, sopped that up in about 2-3 days, came back, you know. And so that began the whole process, and if you will, the conversion to sociology. And of course, needless to say, I had to make up a lot of classes in the summer and all that stuff. And I think I also had to make up a couple of hours from my chapel cuts.
Yeah, in my day, and I guess it was true in your day too, we had to go 5 days a week.
Yes, oh, absolutely. 5 days. Well, and see, I sang, so I was on Sunday morning choir. Yeah, sing. So it was 6 days a week. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you graduate Morehouse 1961. What after Morehouse? What then your next?
Well, I was interested as a result of my experience in Africa and all of that, and I met a fellow, one of the first blacks in the Foreign Service, Robert Kitchen, who was a Morehouse grad. Robert Kitchen. And I remember listening to him. He spoke in the chapel. As you know, we had some amazing speakers, and you know, folks just thought we were just singing and praising God in those days, you know, but we were listening to A. Philip Randolph and, you know, strategic behavior. So he gave this view of international affairs in an amazing way. And I remember a bunch of us talked to him after. I was like maybe a senior, and you know, getting a little of that Morehouse arrogance, you know. You know, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Know?
Good dose of it.
And so I remember going over to him. I said, "Man, you are lying." I didn't even know him, you know. And fortunately, he took it in the right way, you know. And he went on and explained. He said, "I tell you what, you come up to Washington, and I'll show you around." And so I lucked out. I got an internship in the State Department. And that was in the days they were just beginning to open the cracks, you know, of the doors. And in fact, Ree Brazil became a Foreign Service officer as a result of that. You know, Dr. Brazil's daughter.
Yeah. Aurelia?
Aurelia Brazil.
Okay,
yeah, they called her Ree. Yeah.
Okay. I remember Aurelia. What was the other daughter's name? But anyway, I remember both of them, Aurelia and whatever.
Yeah. And in fact, it's funny. Many years later, I introduced her in a huge audience as Ambassador Brazil. You know, and everything was great. She did a fantastic job. And at the end, she said, "Do you think Daddy would be proud of me?" And
where is she now?
she's retired. She's retired, Foreign Service, and she's in Washington. And we get together. And
well, alert her that we're going to have to talk to some of the strong.
You have got to talk to her.
Critically important.
she would be, in fact, I have said to her that somebody's got to write the book about Brazil.
Yeah, absolutely.
There could never have been a Dr. Mays without Brazil. Brazil ran the shop, and he got the money. And it was an amazing relationship that, of course, now I respect, you know, in works that I do. So there needs to be a real focus on, and he made us into the men that we were. I mean, you know, he was courageous enough to tell us not to spit on the concrete.
And to have that handkerchief.
That's right. That's right. You know, do not expectorate on. You know. So that's right.
Yeah.
But it was all about becoming Morehouse men, and so yes, I would. In fact, when I see her, I'll tell her that you're going to be.
And we will be contacting her very
Absolutely.
soon.
Yeah.
Arrange an interview either like this one or we will
Yeah.
go to her.
Yeah. She would be. She would love
She's
that
in Washington.
in Washington, and I could probably, if you call me, I could give you the contacts. Yeah.
So you decide on a career.
So well,
Yeah.
to going on, then I said, well, I'd like to. The Foreign Service was looking really good to me, you know, and in those days, well, still today, you have to have clearances, you know, and I couldn't get cleared because of my arrest records. Now I've never been convicted of a thing, even to this day. Just let the record show. But at that time, as you well know, J. Edgar Hoover made his point to harass everybody, and of course, King was at the top of the list. We know that now,
Yeah.
and so I couldn't get clearances. So then I said, well, let me. There was an African Studies program at Columbia under Gray Cowan, and so I thought that I could get involved through that route, and maybe once I get my credentials, it was a master's degree, so I did that, and I had the good fortune to get a call from Dr. Ruby Puryear. Do you remember that name?
Yes, I do.
A psychologist, and I taught her. I took her class, and she was working for Kenneth B. Clark, famous psychologist.
He spoke here on occasion.
Yep. And she said, well, I remember you because you were pretty good in statistics and all that. Said, could you come by and help us? And of course, I'm in graduate school, and you know, any little gig I can get. So I went to work for her, and not really knowing Kenneth Clark. I knew who he was, but did meet him. And then she left, and Clark came in and said, you know, you got to finish this work. And so we were doing the study of, I was doing the study of Harlem education, Harlem public education. And it came out in a report called HARU, Harlem Youth Opportunities Unlimited, which later came out in a book called Dark Ghetto. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you look in there, you'll see this little guy, Richard Hope, had written. Now I don't think he gave me full credit for that, but enough, you know.
But enough, okay.
And for which I was grateful. And so when that project completed, I went to Dr. Clark and I said, now, where do I go to study to do what I just did? Because I really enjoyed, you know, the research and all that sort of thing. And so he said, he tried to get me to go in sociology, I mean in psychology, because he was a psychologist. And I was fortunate enough to take a class from Saul Kimball at Columbia. And he, and I enjoyed his class, and we got on well. And long story short, one of his students came to him to see if he had any graduate students who could direct project for him. And that turned out to be at Syracuse. but it would have been a full ride for the PhD. So I said, hey, I packed my bags and went on. So I got my doctorate in sociology at Maxwell School at Syracuse.
It's a good school.
Yeah, oh, excellent, outstanding,
Friends who studied there.
outstanding. Yep, yeah. So then I was doing some teaching. I had two little babies, and you know, you trying to feed the mouths and all that sort of stuff.
Well, since you were talking about it, so you got married by this time.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Briefly about that. You know, when did you
The marriage?
your spouse? Yes.
Oh, well, we actually met at the State Department,
Okay.
which is, I guess, one of the only good thing came out of that experience. And I met her there. She's from New York.
Okay.
In fact, a lot of folks say, wait a minute, you didn't marry a Spelman girl? What's wrong with you?
Broke the tradition.
I said, well, hey, I'm looking.
Yeah.
I don't, June Hops, June's a good friend. And I was just, in fact, I had dinner with her last night. We were kidding about that. But anyway, she, New York, and we went to Syracuse. I have two children, Richard Jr. and Leah Hope. Richard is an artist. He has his MFA from Chicago Art Institute, and is an artist in California, and has a studio out there and teaches. The interesting thing is, Lugenia, 100 years earlier, studied at the same Chicago Art Institute, which is ironic. I said, man, this is, and as you know, Walter is now president of the Chicago Art Institute, and that's this, and yeah, and I told Walter about that. Yeah, so, and my daughter is news anchor for ABC in Chicago, so she's always loved the media, and yeah, doing very well. When I left the Maxwell School, I taught at Morgan. Morgan State University. I was chair of sociology. I'm sorry. Well, let me go back in sequence. I went to Brooklyn College, and that's when I got connected, where I founded this Defense Race Relations Institute. Did that, and I wrote a book about that and others. And then let's see. Went to Morgan for 8 years, chair of sociology, anthropology, social work, geography, and any other department that they could put. I had literally 100 faculty. I had 600 majors, and I had something like 1,500, service courses, intro to this, that, and the other. And can you imagine social workers meeting with anthropologists in a department,
Interesting dialogue.
Oh,
debate,
man.
Arguments, I'm sure.
Oh, my God. And I was teaching 3 separate courses per semester. So,
it's a heavy load.
but, it's interesting. It was a heavy load. And when I talked to my colleagues at Princeton, and they said, oh, geez, I'm not going to be able to publish. I'm teaching one course this semester and another course the next semester. And I almost slapped them in the face. I said, are you kidding me? You don't know what problems are, And then they got the nerve to say, we don't publish. You know what I mean? You hear that kind of thing, And I said, and to have a guy like yourself who publishes, and Alton, I mean, these guys should be in the pantheon of the gods somewhere, Oh, my God. Okay, so then Indiana University was chair out there, sociology, went to MIT, and my uncle went to MIT, which I didn't know, Edward Hope. And I think he was the first to get a graduate degree, first black to get a graduate degree at MIT. And I had great pleasure walking him around. He was in a wheelchair at the time, and going around and met the president. The president was a good friend of mine, and And of course, Edward, I don't know, well, you probably didn't know him, but Edward went in there and lectured the president on why he shouldn't have more minorities on the faculty. And of course, this particular guy was very good, you know. So I thanked him later for his patience.
I know Edward's son, Edward.
Right, who lives here.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
We were at Morris State.
Yeah.
So, finally, how did you come to the foundation?
Okay, and then from MIT, well, I don't know. I should put this on tape. I won't put this on tape, but
Well, we can talk about it later.
talk about
Keep
the,
it
as
going,
as
we'll
to
move on
the
something.
the reason it was personal. It had to do with the nature, shall we say, of a society in
Okay.
Boston
All right.
at the time, having to do with racism.
All
I'll
We can
put
talk
that
about
on.
off the record, but-
All right, but anyway, it just was not comfortable. I was very surprised. You
Yeah,
know how,
yeah.
I guess we in the South think, you know, this
Yeah,
we got
yeah.
problems,
No,
and then you go into the
Yeah.
North and
yeah.
you know, and guys saying
Yeah.
to my wife, "Who's made of you?" You know, and that, you know, it just
Yeah.
didn't.
Mm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so it was there that I just sort of began to look around and then to the foundation.
How long have you been at the foundation?
Since '89.
89. Good.
Yeah, and I came there really for 2 years. And a buddy mine who I knew in sociological circles, who was chair of sociology at the time, came over and said, "Now, what are you doing? You going to be in the department?" So I became full professor in sociology there, and so I balanced the two. And that's, as you know, that's a nice kind
Yeah,
of
it is.
between a foundation and faculty.
I have two final questions and then an open-ended opportunity for you to tell us what you want to talk about, and then we'll close. The next question would be, I understand that you're a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. I'm non-fractional, but how did you decide on Alpha as opposed to the other options? You know, the other fractions. So how did you decide on Alpha?
Well, the decision, well, I think was probably made for me because, you know, John Hope, my grandfather was Alpha, and my father's Alpha,
So,
and you know, so
family
I was never recruited by anybody else but Alpha. I guess they just assumed, you
Yeah.
know. So we had I remember a very strong line of 12 guys, I think it was. Charles Meredith was in that group. Melvin Douglas Smith in that group. Charles Smith, the fellow I told you about. Green. What? Milford.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Where is Milford now?
Well,
I guess I shouldn't
well,
answer.
so
Well,
it's-
later,
well,
we
you
can-
know about that. So
Yeah, okay.
there's some
Yeah. Okay.
discord with Bob, so he's kind of disappeared.
Okay. Okay.
But that, okay, so now that's clear to family tradition or legacy.
Right.
The last question before we allow you an opportunity to tell us anything you want to tell us is that this issue or question or idea of the Morehouse mystique, how would you define that? I know it's challenging for all of us to really find it, but in your mind what it is. And we're going to try to, in the book, summarize all of our thinking on what this Morehouse mystique is. What would you say?
Well, I first would compare it, let's say, to other schools where I've taught. And first of all, you don't have the sense, and I've taught in a bunch of schools, including Morgan and the other schools that I mentioned. I've never found a school where there was the camaraderie that existed. Even in misery, there was camaraderie, and support for each other. As I say, I've got. I heard about frankly, I was out of the country, and I heard about the reunion, and nothing had been done, you know. And I just started calling guys. And, you know, in a week, we had 50 guys that were ready to go. And so it's that kind of connection. So there's more that goes on at Morehouse than just teaching. And that's why I think it's so important, and I was saying this to President Franklin, that the students, for the most part, still have that campus life experience. The students that are off campus never had that. For example, Julian Bond, at the time, doesn't have as close a relationship, as much as he loves Morehouse, but he doesn't have as close a relationship because he lived off campus. But we who lived on campus, I mean, you know, I can give you the names of people who lived in Beaverslide when I was there as a freshman, you know, and even some of those that didn't return. And so you have, first, a kind of friendship that is abiding in nature and bonding over time. And then overlaying that, you have the educational experience, which is not just in the class. For example, Jim Burney taught a lot of biology standing in front of remember how he would stand in front of the building there? And the guys didn't have to worry, oh, you know, is he approachable? Can I go in on this cell? Can I ask him about cellular division or something? You know, and he was there, you know. Pop Shivers was always open, and that's how I transferred to sociology, and Dr. Mays. I remember we had there was one of these amazing days that we went to get our food, and what we had were 3 beans, 3 different types of beans.
And that was it?
and we almost had a food fight down there. And so we said no. Well, and it's funny, and I'll tell you a bit about Brazil in a minute. But in terms of even organizing, say, the complaint, we immediately didn't go into fist fights and throwing stuff around. We sort of organized and said, well, we're going to talk to the man. So we took a tray of this meal over to the house, Dr. Mays, and Dr. Mays met us, and he said, well, now, you all sit down. And he saw that as an educating moment, you know. He didn't get upset because we were, you know, I guess we could have looked like we were threatening. And we all sat down, and he then gave a kind of history of how we are supported here, you know. Because we used to have this thing that a truck would bring in fresh fruit and take out the garbage. Well, we always said that they got confused and went the reverse. You get that image, right?
And this is when the dining room was in the basement of sales?
That's right. That's
Robert Hall.
Hall. That's right. That's right.
But go ahead.
And so, but my point is that okay, even in stressful moments, there was such love there, and respect, even among us. I mean, we didn't go in there tearing up stuff, you know. We just wanted to know why. And he understood that, and he went through the whole, in a sense, the finances of Morehouse, you know, and we went sort of bowing and scraping backwards, you know, thank you, sir, thank you, you know, it's sort of one of those things. So
we could do that in our days when we could approach Dr. Mays.
Yeah.
Live close by anyway.
That's right, and I'll give you another example. Dean Brazil, well, I was head of, at that time, the Interfraternal Council. And, you know, we just knew we were the baddest dudes around because we had a little money that we could throw around, you know. And I forget what it was that, I don't, to show you how important it was, I don't even know why. But anyway, and I don't think I really wanted to do it, but you know, we met the day before, and they said, well, we're just not going to give money to Morehouse because of this, whatever. Maybe some of my friends can tell me. And so I got up in chapel, and you know, when you have the student meetings, you know, and it said that the Interfraternal Council pledges zero money because of the, and I'm, giving this oration, all the way, this kind of, and Dean Brazell said, okay, I want you to present me with the particulars, another education moment. And so he said, well, young man, you come to my office at such a time, and I'll receive your particulars. And of course, I went around and said, hey, what's a particular?
But once you learned what it was, you learned what
whatever, yes, sir, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anyway, so I wrote this letter, to Morehouse, that the whole thing, and made sure my spelling was correct and everything. So I give it to him, and he sat down and he said, "Okay, fine, I accept that." I signed it, and he said, "Now put it in this envelope and give it to me." So he got one of these long envelopes out, and so I started folding it, like it was like a friendly letter. I'm creasing the thing, messing it all up, not knowing what the hell I was doing. And he said, "Young man, give me the letter." he said, "Now this is the way you fold a business letter. You go like this, and you like this, and you put it in and seal it." And I said, "Yes, sir." And then he opened it up, and he said, "Now you do that." And, but again, this is an educational moment that, and he does that out of respect and love for the students. It's not to say we didn't protest. It's not to say we didn't think independently, but there was this kind of feeling. And of course, that feeling rubs off when we saw Dr. Mays crossing, with erect man going to the office. If we figured it out, as we did a little survey, let's see, if he got beyond the bushes, we were late, for our 8 o'clock classes. And but all of those influences, and I was in the Glee Club and the quartet, and we travel all over, and we support each other, and so there is that, and the respect of the faculty for the students does rub off in the sense that they say, hey, they think I'm somebody, so I must be somebody. Now that doesn't mean, as a family, we don't kick your butt. I mean, if you do something wrong, because there were times, I'm sure, like everybody else, but there was always the respect and that you could achieve, and it meant hard work, but achieving was successful.
Yeah, there's something exceptional about the school, and I'm sure that you would agree with me. I can't imagine having gone somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we're very pleased.
Now, I'm sure you read Chuck Willie's book,
Yes, I have.
The College Mystique.
Oh, yes, I have.
Yeah, and so get him to come back and make sure you got about 6 tapes there for you get Chuck for Chuck.
Yeah, and get him on one-on-one rather than in a group situation.
Right.
As we now close, we certainly appreciate you giving us this time to ask questions. In all interviews, we would like for you to give us permission to call you or email you or contact you in some way if there's a question we have after we review it. Or ask additional questions. I don't think there would be a need for you to give time to come back if you're in town and there's something. But do we have that right to contact
Oh, of course.
you to clarify things?
Yeah.
And certainly.
Yeah. I think this is a wonderful project, by the way. That
I don't know whether you have the paperwork for him to
yeah, I
sign,
signed.
release forms and all
Yeah.
that. But now the final question or opportunity, is there anything you would like to say that I didn't ask or that did not come up in our wonderful conversation? It was a learning experience for me, and it stimulated me. So is there anything that you would like to add before we turn the table?
Well, of course, you know, like all Morehouse men, I could go on for days in terms of you know, the impact. And the one thing I observed, even in teaching Princeton students, well, they call it esprit de corps up there, you know. You know, it just doesn't exist there.
Yeah.
In fact, you'll be interested at two things that I'm working on now. I don't know, maybe, well, I'd be interested in your thoughts, and maybe we can do it offline. But one is that Chuck and I are working with a foundation to see if we can't get money to Morehouse to bring in students from other, like a Princeton, to come to Morehouse. In other where they can learn something more than just, you know, the academics. That there is something here because of this mystique, and there is an experience of understanding the African American history, and so to in a sense give money to Morehouse to support this idea of receiving students from all over the world. You know, when I had programs in South Africa, for example, and you know, when I talk about Morehouse, you know, it's almost a mystical experience for them because of the different experiences that they've had, and would that they would have such an experience like that here. And so, and you know, all over the world when I talk, you get this from students saying, geez, I wish I had that kind of experience, you know. So we're...
Well, but I certainly am willing to work with the Morehouse contact.
Yeah, okay.
If need be, or if not the Morehouse contact, certainly
Well,
the person who's willing to participate
wonderful.
in any way that I can. I
Great.
direct the African American Studies program as well as being a professor in the history department. So I'd be glad to do that.
Excellent.
And, you know, kind of know Morehouse.
Great, yeah, yeah.
So
And
count me in.
the other idea is to see if you were interested. There are a lot of Morehouse men all over the world who have amazing academic credentials and who would love to teach at Morehouse. The biggest issue, they can't afford it. They can't.
We've been talking about that for a while.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
And I won't put that on. But the issue of having some of them come back fully paid, whatever their pay is, but so that they can, and they really want to come back and just teach at Morehouse.
Right.
You know, semester, year, whatever, and have some kind of rotating, I don't know what you'd call it, but and I think it would be an interesting kind of experience.
Well, I really think that's doable. I mean, that's like the academic year next year. We might be able to work on that. I know I agree with you, and I'm aware that a number of our alums would like to do that. And you're absolutely right. We have produced some of our graduates who have very illustrious careers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Academic credentials.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I will work on that. I know some of them have already contacted me about
Yes.
such an arrangement.
Yeah.
Nothing has been formalized, but I think I need to get on that. So we'll look
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Would
And
you be willing to come back for a lecture or something?
absolutely. Absolutely. And what I was thinking is maybe getting some foundations to
Okay,
take a look
great.
at that to support that idea. Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, there and you know a lot of like Eddie Cloud and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
these guys
Former student,
who you know.
right.
You scratch. They're all now very erudite, you know. And yes, I'm at
Absolutely,
Princeton, you know. But
absolutely.
at the core, they're still Morehouse, you
That's
know.
right.